The following is brought to you by Total Seal Piston Rings, the leader in ring seal technology. TotalSeal.com. Hidden Horsepower is back. Hello, everyone. Joe Castello back with you, WFO Joe. And we have got another episode of Hidden Horsepower. And before we bring in the co-host, before we bring on our guest, I just want to say thank you to everyone out there who is sharing the show and telling your friends about Hidden Horsepower. We have seen explosive growth. It has been fantastic now with the Facebook group and the Facebook page and doing a lot of fun things with this podcast feed. The audience is growing, so thank you very much. If you have yet to write a review on Apple Podcast, please do so. That is very helpful. Rate and review. And, of course, share with your friends. If they're into this stuff, they're going to absolutely love Hidden Horsepower. Without further ado, let's bring on the co-host, Mr. Keith Jones, the Director of Technical Sales at Total Seal. Keith, welcome back to another episode.
Well, thanks for having me again. As always, really enjoy doing these. Love our guests. Love the conversations. Let me tell you, just couldn't be more excited. Really enjoy doing these things, and I really appreciate all the positive comments, reach outs. I get comments that literally folks from all over the world, complimenting us on this and what a unique format is, and they've never seen anything like it. I did have a gentleman reach out to me the other day with a complaint.
Oh, good.
And he loved the show. His only comment was, they're too short. He wishes they were like 2.5 hours.
No, he's
That's
crazy.
That's a complaint anyway. I had to share that. That was his issue. Is they're too short.
Dear sir, please, 40 minutes of I think that we should do more episodes, but who knows? Who am I to tell the audience? Who am I to tell the audience what they want to hear? But you got to think about it, right? We've got a great guest today, Tony Bischoff, BES Racing Engines. Has got engines out there in world champions and drag racing everywhere. This is going to be a great conversation. But the people who listen to podcasts, they got an earbud in, they're working on something, they're increasing their knowledge. And I can imagine if you're looking for secrets, if you're an engine builder, if you want to know the tricks of the trade or what these greatest of the great that are on Hidden Horsepower, the knowledge that they know, of course you want to get them going for 2 hours straight. So it makes perfect sense. Thank you for that. All right, Keith, are you ready to bring on our guest?
Absolutely.
All right. From Indiana, Tony Bischoff from BES Racing Engines, going to dive in right away. Tony, welcome to Hidden Horsepower. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing okay. Good to be here.
All right, what do you think?
Excited to see what we got.
Should the episodes be 2.5 hours long, Tony?
I don't know. I don't have attention span that long, so I can't say that. So
there it is. Sorry, sir. Tony voted no. Sorry. That's it.
Exactly.
That's it. Keith, I served it up for Tony. Tony says short attention span makes perfect sense. Tony, before we get started, I know you and Keith have a lot to talk about in that, we're going to delve into ring seal and a couple of different things. Your engine building prowess, though, kind of spans various motorsports. Very often we'll speak with someone who they're specialized, right? Whether they make their living in the sprint car world or the drag racing world, and just running up and down the list of people you make power for, it's not only across all forms of motorsport, from drag racing to truck pulling, but within drag racing, you're doing big nitrous engines, you're doing stock eliminator engines for world champions. It's not like you have a niche. You seem to extend into all forms of drag racing and motorsports.
Yep. Yeah, we do just about everything, and I'm not sure why you think it would be easier if we specialized, but I enjoy doing everything, and maybe that's why, and I guess that's why we do it, just because I get bored pretty easy. So, doing nitrous engines and turbo engines and truck pulling engines and supercharged engines, it keeps it definitely very interesting. So.
Well, it's interesting to me, and I think that's good for your knowledge and what we're going to talk about here on Hidden Horsepower. Something I found interesting, though, is that you didn't start off wanting to build race engines, or maybe you wanted to build race engines, but where you made your initial money was stock engine rebuilds. And
yes.
the lessons learned from that critical situation of not, like the pressure of not wanting that engine to come back to you. helped you build high-performance racing engines. Can you talk a little bit about that? I thought that was very interesting.
Well, definitely. People think, stock engines is much easier, but that's really not the case because you have to guarantee everything you do. So if it doesn't go out there and, last 100,000 miles or more, people get upset with you. So it really, I think it sets the stage for doing better engines because you truly learn how to make an engine live like that. And then it just, developed from there into race engines today. Now, stock rebuilds is not very popular anymore just because new cars ain't really designed to be rebuilt, and plus it's hard to compete with engine remanufacturers and make a living. So,
but at that time, you were, and tell me if I'm overstepping here, but almost, I don't want to say redesigning, but absolutely improving what the factory did. Like you'd look at an engine and say, oh man, this is something that is going to come back because it's just not right. And that's the mentality that helped you build racing engines. Can dive in a little on that.
Well, absolutely. We kind of learned how to modify things a little bit to make them last longer, and also to get a little bit more power out of them. And naturally, being a hot rodder, we're always looking how to make something run better. So it just if we could do it without making the job more expensive, that's what we did. So, yeah.
And a couple of years doing that, got involved in racing, obviously being a hot rodder, but sand drags, that's kind of a cool way to get started. Tell me a little bit about what you used to drive, and being in the Midwest, like, where is there sand?
Well, we called it sand drags, but it really was dirt drags. Occasionally you had tracks that, they put pea gravel on or something, and then they called it sand drags, at least around here. So it was really just dirt drags. And,
Got it.
I got started into that just because there was some local dirt drags around here, and it was much closer than going to the drag strip. And it was pretty popular around here in farm country, so that's how I got started into that. And it just morphed into drag racing, and we kind of got involved into the NMCA streetcar world there in the mid-'90s, and it morphed from there, basically. So.
You've certainly taken off. Keith, dive in here with a question.
Well, yeah, Tony, one of the things that, that I think, you talked about, building different engines, and one of the things that I run into with certain shops that kind of become niche builders is when you're doing that same thing over and over and over all the time, not to say that you lose the challenge or perspective, but you kind of get into a groove. And, looking at how you do things and knowing how you do things as a complete engine program kind of a point of view, I would think the diversity of all these kind of engines helps keep you on your toes. You see something in this engine that, hey, we could apply that to this kind of an engine, whether it be circle track, drag race. I would think being able to have all those different kinds of things coming through your door, we'll just say keeps you on your toes. You don't get complacent. You're always seeing and looking for new things. We'll just say, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, absolutely. You can learn something from anything, and everything kind of flows over to each different application. So sometimes I wonder why I do everything, just because of the simple fact that it seems like I'm wound tight all the time, and it kind of makes life a little rough sometimes. But it definitely makes it much more interesting. I know my employees, they talk about the fact that they get to do something different every day, and so yeah, it can create its own set of problems, but it sure makes life fun anyway, or job fun. So
keeping up with the technology has been interesting, and a common thread through all of our guests has been an interest to keep up, and I would imagine you absolutely have to. But in the past, and you tell me, but it seems like 10, 20 years, it's just been a total assault of technology, with the electronic fuel injection coming in and becoming really user-friendly, the turbochargers coming in, becoming commonplace, right? Like the last 20 years, turbos were not a thing, and now they're everywhere. ProCharger, just technological leaps, so the centrifugal supercharger, and every time something new is on the scene, and how much relearning, re-education do you have to go through before you dive into a project?
Well, with the advent of fuel injection and user-friendly fuel injection is the key word right there, and also with the younger generation being a whole lot more computer savvy than I am, I do struggle with that bad. So, but that is what makes the turbochargers and the superchargers and all of it much better, because if you can't control the fuel and the timing and the whole engine correctly, all that stuff just leads to disaster. I used to be a carburetor guy, and I still am, but you can't run a turbocharger or anything with big power with a carburetor these days. And so, yeah, naturally that's the real technology that I think has made the boosted applications or any power adder application much better than they used to be. 15 years ago, nobody knew how to do that stuff. So yeah, that was that's the real difference in the electronic controls.
Yeah, I agree with Tony in that respect completely. It was eye-opening to me because of, we'll just say, my age. I'm a carburetor guy as well, but I'm really embracing the EFI, and as Tony just said, I'll call it the easy-to-use EFIs that are now available. You don't have to have a PhD in electronic fuel injection to understand it. And just a few weeks ago, it's longer than that now, maybe a couple months ago now, spent a few days at Ben Strader's EFI University, myself and Lake and Ed Keebler and David from Rottler were up there. And, Ben, as the most gracious host, kind of showed us. I mean, he had an engine on the dyno. We put a Dominator on it and ran it and, played with it and fussed with it and, took time to get the fuel curve dialed in. And, we'll say hour and a half later and X amount of pulls on this thing, we really got it pretty good. We put the fuel injection setup on it, fired it up, and I'm not joking, within 3 hits, bang, it's already corrected itself. We're right where the carburetor was. And it did it, in a third the time. I was just blown away at how fast this thing, learned what it needed to learn. And, did we get the same power? Yeah, we got almost identical numbers, but the amount of messing around we had to do with the carburetor to get it there, and I'm not trying to beat up carburetors. As I said, I'm a carburetor guy. It really opened my eyes to, the modern fuel injection.
Well, there's no doubt that that's a big difference. It was really the advent of the wideband O2 sensors that actually works correctly, that gives you a real accurate, air-fuel ratio. That's really is what made the fuel injection what it is today. And it certainly helped, even engine life a lot. Just the fact that, when you got the correct air-fuel ratio, you're not washing down the oil off the cylinder walls and running lean or whatever have you what you're usually doing with the carburetor. So, yeah, that's definitely a huge advantage to the performance world.
Well, no, I wanted to just expand on that. It is amazing because we get a lot of calls from a lot of people asking us about, different rings and ring thicknesses and how long is this going to hold up, and are they going to last? Are they going to do these things? Or can I get this kind of time out of it? And it blows me away, looking at the mileage that NASCAR can get out of a set of rings today, and V8 Supercar in Australia, and NHRA Pro stock, and though from my side, it's not good for sales. But it goes to the technology of the fuel injection and keeping that, as Tony said, that fuel management right, fuel wash down, keeping detonation, knock out of the engine, just literally how much longer the parts are lasting, and it's all stems from from EFI and the dramatic improvement in efficiency.
Absolutely makes a huge difference.
What have you seen in terms of, Keith is obviously the ring seal guru, and over the course of Hidden Horsepower, we have heard so many people talk about him approaching with technology that is maybe, new or something that you're not sure it's going to work, and then ultimately it ends up working. Do you have any stories like that where maybe you wanted to push the edge of the envelope, or they suggested that you guys should try something new, and maybe it worked out, maybe it didn't work out, but it was a learning experience?
Well, absolutely. When it comes to horsepower, especially in a naturally aspirated situation, always the thinner rings, they make more power and they seal better. I was always worried about them holding up for any amount of time because they're so light, but really they hold up well, and the thinner ring just plain makes more power. So I've never had them steer me wrong in that kind of situation. But naturally, depending on the situation, power outer stuff, naturally you can't run as light a ring because it can't handle the heat as long. But really, I've never had them steer me wrong. So, yeah.
And Keith, what's it like working with Tony on so many varied projects?
Well, the nice thing, one of the nice things about working with Tony is his knowledge level. I mean, Tony is, pretty humble when you talk about this kind of stuff, but the man's won Engine Masters 6 times. That says, that speaks volumes. That's not an easy competition. These are bringing out, the best of the best creative thinkers. Some of the absolutely insane things that I've seen done at Engine Masters I would have never thought of in my life, but these guys are coming up with that. So, the great thing about working with Tony and guys like Tony is the open-mindedness. Hey, what do you think about this? Well, he'll come in, hey, we're building one of these, we're working on that. What do you think about this ring? Do we want a gapless ring? Do we want a conventional ring? Do we want, what about a Napier? We talk, that it's not just, oh, hey, send me this. We talk about it. And what, do we want to put a gas-ported ring in it? Do we want to do a gas-ported ring with a gas-ported piston? We're bouncing ideas, and that's that fluid dynamic of we'll say sussing it out, and building something specific for a given application is one of the great things about working with a guy like Tony. And, again, open to talking about, cylinder bore finishes. What do you think about this? What about these values, these numbers, bore geometry, the whole package approach. And, that, and again, is what's great about working with Tony.
You think rings is pretty simple, even, hone jobs is simple, but it's amazing how more in depth we get with cylinder wall finishes and the different levels of the peaks of your bores and the valleys of the bores and the core finish of the bores. You think that gets pretty complicated. It's surprising, and this is the great thing about working with Keith is you can talk about different power levels and different fuels and stuff like it, and how much you have to change that. When you're doing different stuff like alcohol, for sure adds a whole another realm of problems when you run that because it washes the cylinders down so bad. So keeping a oil film on there becomes pretty difficult. And we've been working with Keith a lot with that, and we still haven't, at least I haven't personally figured out how to do that exactly right, but we're getting there. So
now the 6-time Engine Master deal, I want to mention that just because it's such a major headline, right? The Horsepower King. That's a rep. That's a rep that you carry around, right? Like, there he goes, the Horsepower King.
Yep, I even got a jacket from there that says that, so I claim that one. So, but the Engine Masters, that is a cool competition just because of the simple fact that like he said, you got 40 engine builders from all over the country, and you compete to make the best average power. And so you learn a lot with that contest. It's not about just peak power. It's about, getting the best average power. And that's what makes any car faster. So, that was a very interesting thing to do on. So we're looking forward in the future to maybe doing some more of that, but we'll see what the future holds. But yeah, that's a lot of fun.
Well, one of the things, Tony, again, kind of knowing, like on your phone advertisement, talking about port flow numbers, really is, granted, is that a value? Yes, that's a value, but it's really not the thing. It's all, what kind of power does it make? And I really feel, again, our conversations talking about the whole thing is a combination. And one of the things, you mentioned earlier is building, like performance. Street car stuff is not just race car engines. It's everything. It's circle track. It's sand drags. It's, it's boats, planes, trains, and automobiles, as I like to say. It's everything. And one of the things that I run into on a daily basis is these high horsepower street car guys trying to get them to wrap their head around it, that it's not, it may make 2,000 horsepower, but it's still a street car. And what they miss is, it's not about the power level. It's about how you drive it and the things that street cars have to do that race cars don't, meaning, they don't have to sit and idle at stoplight for 5 minutes. They're not cruising down the freeway, at 65 miles an hour, part throttle, making intake vacuum, and why, maybe that trick of the week ring that you read about, from somebody that's, a 0.5 millimeter, which is a phenomenal part in a naturally aspirated cup race engine. I don't mean trickle a wheat, by the way. Maybe that's not right for their twin turbo LS making 2,000 horsepower. Maybe we need to build some resiliency and some durability. And again, my whole point is taking the whole, looking at the whole package approach. And I think that's a big part of what Tony does, and part of the reason he gets the reliability. And again, your comments there, Tony.
The street car world, that's a very frightening world for me, because I get customers that tell me, I want 1,200 rear-wheel horsepower, 1,500 rear-wheel horsepower, and drive it on the street. And that's really so unrealistic, because what Keith just mentioned, in a drag race world, you completely control the temperature. You're only running for 6, 8, 10 seconds or whatever, and that's easy. But on the street world, if you got 1,500 horsepower and with everything in perfect conditions, and then you go out and it's 220 degrees and you try to run it there, and it usually ends up in disaster. Blown head gaskets, burnt pistons, you name it. And so that's really, I think that's an unrealistic world, and people ask me about that all the time, and I tell them that, first of all, would you need 1,500 horsepower, because you can't actually floor it. So that does present a whole set of problems that we have to deal with, and usually I try to talk people to a little bit more manageable power level, just so we don't have to see it back with broken parts and burnt pistons and whatever. So, yeah, that's a thing in itself.
There's something to that, though, right? Let's explore it a little more deeply, because the only reason that's a problem is because now it's possible to do. Years ago, it was not a challenge. You never had that guy come into your office and ask for 1,500 horsepower while he's stuck in traffic on the 405 in California, because nobody could do that. That was not an option.
Unobtainium.
It was unobtainium, but now it is, and you guys are having to push against that, and I can imagine you're trying to talk customers like, hey, just because we can do it, it might not be the best thing. It's better to have, and please tell me what you think the best range might be. 850 horsepower you can actually hook up and drive around, as opposed to 1,500 that's going to cause you problems.
Well, absolutely, yeah, you're right. With so much better cars and tires, you can actually hook up 1,000 horsepower, at least once you hit 60 or 80 mile an hour. But how fast do you really need to go? But you're absolutely right. It is in the realm of possibilities. So yeah, it's we deal with it every day, but it's still I'm a drag race guy, so I think about crashing at 190 mile an hour. So I personally don't see a reason I would ever want that, but a lot of people, that's what they want. So.
No, I totally understand. As someone who's has a passion for drag racing as well, I wonder those things as well. Like, hey, 2,000 horsepower you can't use. What's the point? But then again, I get it. Now, Tony, you make you've built engines for Allison Smith, who has won Stock Eliminator World Championships, which is great.
Yep.
But also the factory showdown stuff, which is kind of like two ends of the opposite spectrum. The most ragged edge of Stock Eliminator and the factory showdown stuff, and then Stock Eliminator. How are they different? How are they the same? And talk a little bit about some of these showdown engines, which are capturing the imagination. Everybody is loving the category. It's amazing to see Stock Eliminator style cars running the 7s with superchargers, and these are factory style engines.
Well, that class is, it is a really cool class. It's a very expensive class because it is a cool class and people want to run it, and the more people that can afford to run it, the more expensive it becomes. Naturally, they got 320 or 360 cubic inch engines, and with a lot of compression, with 20 pounds of boost, depends on the the Ford, Chrysler, Chevy that you're running, But yeah, that's a real cool class, but it offers its own set of problems because you have now 3 different brands trying to compete against each other, and NHRA tries to keep the playing field even. So they're constantly, if you get one combination that runs really fast, and then they might hit it with a pulley change, so now it brings them back into line and makes another combination, the top of the heap. But So it does present its own set of complications there, but it's still a cool class. Like you said, a 3,600-pound car that really is a stock body for the most part that runs 760s, 780s. So it's cool. 1,500 horsepower out of a more or less a street engine. So
I agree with them. I mean, it's one of the things that I would love to see happen. And here's the thing, some people when the factory shootout cars first came out said, hey, it's the new Pro Stock. It should replace Pro Stock. You heard that all the time. And what I'd love to see is, and I love NHRA Pro Stock. I love Pro Stock cars. I don't want to see that change in any way, shape, or form. But like the old Pro Stock cars, I would love to see maybe like a factory shootout experimental where, okay, we can put a tube chassis in it. We can put some big tires underneath the back, put the safety equipment in that, is required and kind of take the handcuffs off a little bit. Let's see how fast these new engine platforms can go. Like the old, like say the old FX programs, I don't know. That's just me kind of pipe dreaming, and I'm sure it cost $1 billion to do it. But I think the fans would dig it, and hey, what's it take to put one of these things in the sixes? I think it'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, that would be a different world for sure. I have never really thought about that, so I don't have too much to say about that. So.
Let's make them have clutches while we're rewriting the rule book, right?
Absolutely.
Well, you guys like the hard way.
Yes. Well, we're not doing it, Tony.
Yeah, liberty's required,
But to that point, though, your origin story of working as a regular mechanic and as a machine shop on stock engines that you didn't want to ever see come back into the shop and have to warranty the work, dealing with factory parts is my point. And now what you see coming out of the factories with these showdown engines, we all know that if you're going to compete at that highest level, as great as the engine is from the factory, it's not what's going to put you in the winner's circle. That's why they come to you, the horsepower king. But those factory engines that you're disassembling and re-engineering to make them as perfect as is possible, how far have they come since the stuff that you were working on back in the day? Now, I know it's a race engine, but what's rolling out of these factories as race engines, when you tear them apart, do you still find many things that you like to re-engineer?
Well, there's always stuff to re-engineer. Always. There's always, everything can be better. And naturally, when the OEMs are making it, they have to try to design in some dependability and profitability as far as, how much they have in them to build them. So there's always stuff that we can do, but you're right, the late model stuff is so many miles ahead, in their port design and camshaft design, and a lot of them, the Fords have 4 valves per cylinders and stuff. So they're so far ahead of a 1980s engine that it's unbelievable. But at the same time, like you said, there's always something to improve on as far as port design and valves and cams and induction, and so that keeps us busy for sure. So.
Tony, the technology has advanced from the factory. What about the aftermarket, like Total Seal, for instance? We're talking about rings. Have you seen their product get better?
Oh, absolutely. I noticed occasionally we'll leak down brand new engines that's never been started, and these rings are so round when they're new that if you leak a motor down without even starting it, breaking the rings in it, they leak perfect. So that quality has made my life a whole lot easier because you don't have to worry about the ring sealing, really. It just, getting the engine to pull 20-plus inches of vacuum is easy these days, whereas 20 years ago that was a tough deal. So yeah, they've definitely stepped their game up in making stuff round and flat and precision.
One of the things that I get, and like I said before, we field so many phone calls, and so many of the young guys are on the phone, and what Tony just said, they've watched YouTube, they've read the book, they've read all this stuff on the internet, but their hands have never done this before, and I feel such a paranoia, if that's the right word to use, of making a mistake. I overfiled the rings 4,000. That's not going to hurt anything, dude. Put it in. You've got such a paranoia of screwing up, and from where I am, just like the Pontiac thing that Tony mentioned, is we learn from our mistakes, folks. So embrace the mistake. If you screwed up, hey, you screwed up. We learn from that. Don't be afraid of it. That's how we learn things.
Absolutely, and you're right. That's truly the only. This is the best way. I know it sounds bad, but it's the best way to learn because you don't forget and you see firsthand every little thing. It sounds simple, even sliding a piston into a bore, but having a good quality ring funnel and even the knowledge of just what it should take to put it in the bore and understanding what oil ring tension and stuff like it is, and having it to check that is a big plus. That the only way you're going to learn it is just to do it. So
all the different engine platforms and all the different things you've worked on, Tony, and I'll just touch base on what he said. From a manufacturing machining point of view, the late model engines that I've gotten to take a look at, unbelievable the quality level of what they've done. Now, granted, they still have restrictions. They've got to have a warranty. They've got to hit a price point, profitability, the power level they want it to make, not necessarily what the end user wants it to be. But amazing to me how good they are. But with all of that said, is there a form of racing, an engine platform, something you haven't dove into yet, Tony, that you're kind of chomping at the bit, to tackle land speed? Is there something out there that you is on your bucket list to build?
Oddly enough, no. I must be getting too old. You know what? I always just enjoy improving on what people bring to me. So I really don't have anything that I would like to do other than, what customers ask me to do. So, I never realized that until you just asked me that question. But I don't have anything that I'm currently thinking about that I would like to do. So, yeah.
Life is complete. There.
You think I it must be.
Let me come at it from another way, though, Tony, in that, okay, if that is in fact the case, as you look back, what are some of the things you're most proud of having worked on and accomplished? Like when you look back, like, all right, that's great. We talked about 6-time engine master, et cetera, but what about your personal your pride for something, a challenge you took on and accomplished as you look back at your career?
Well, I'm a real competitive person, so anything I get into, I want to win and do well. But as far as anything in particular, naturally the Engine Masters is probably my proudest moment. I remember the first one we won. That was huge. When you're competing against guys like John Causey and all the other guys that there, it's just they're probably as passionate or more than I am about stuff. And naturally, what I found in life and in the engine world, the more I worked, the harder I worked, the longer I worked at it, the better we did. And so that's just, pretty well normal lessons in life. If you have to succeed, you just got to bust your butt. But as far as anything in particular, the Engine Masters, and when I first started racing, I started out in sand dragging, and I did so well with that I kind of got a little bored with it. So then we moved on to the street car world, and I think I went into a class called Hot Street in 1999. That was a long time ago. And I think I won the championship after the second or third year I was in that, and that was cool. And then I kind of quit driving after that, but we ran, I think it was called Super Street or something in NMCA, and we did real well in that. And then I ran the Pro 5.0 NMRA with my old Cougar, and I won a championship there. And, everything I done like that, it just, it seems like if I fall into it, since I'm competitive, I do well just because I work hard, I guess, so.
Oh, absolutely. Like you said, if it was easy, everybody'd do it. And I think that, is kind of a common thread, what Tony just said with guys that we deal with this industry or within this industry that are like-minded to Tony. If they take on a project, they're not taking it on to be the second best. They want to put the work in, do the research, test the parts, push the envelope, to find that championship, to be that winner, to be the best there is. And I think that, guys like Tony that are driven to do this are what keep pushing this industry further and further. I know, from a ring point of view, that's what pushes us, is the guys like Tony. I mean, nobody ever asks us, to knock 15 or 20 horsepower out of their car. I can't imagine anybody ever walks into Tony's shop and, it just makes too much steam. What can we do? Can we put a smaller carburetor or smaller injectors? They never come at us and ask us for a ring that's going to knock power out. It's always what's new, what can we do to make more? And I think that's, kind of what drives the guys like Tony, because they're the ones that drive us to keep improving.
Yep, absolutely. Always just striving for the extra 5, extra 10, and you're always just changing stuff constantly and trying to figure out what works the best. So.
I mean, looking at all the new stuff that you see, especially like the new Coyote platforms and the overhead cams, multi-valve engines, the thin ring technologies that the factories have embraced. Amazing to me how thin some of the stuff is out of the OEs these days. The technologies that we have. Do you see an area, Tony, where there's, we'll say, the 5s, the 10s to find, or do you think they're, we're down to the 1s and 2s? They're that refined. Is there an area in these things where they're leaving it on the table on the cylinder finish, they're leaving it on the table on the cylinder head, or the manifold has a lot to be desired? I didn't know if there was any. I'm not asking for. It is hidden horsepower, so I guess I'm asking for the secrets. Where do you think the next thing is on any specific thing you have in mind?
That's a good question, and I really don't have an answer for it because, like you said, everything is getting so much more refined. The gains are getting smaller and smaller. So, I got to think, and I don't know where it's at, that we got to think out of the box a little bit at this point to see any real big gains, and that's where we need to go. Really, got to think a bit out of the box because it's how much more power you're going to get out of a ring that's already 23 thousandths wide or and stuff like that. So maybe a little bit more. The ring seal's so good. I don't see how much power can you get when you got a motor that leaks down 0 to 1% or has virtually zero blow by while they're making 1,000 horsepower. How much power is going to be gained there? So we just got to think out of the box and come up with some new stuff really. But I really don't have anything in particular that I've come up with. So I don't have anything for you there. So.
And if you did, would you just tell us?
We'll keep working on it with you, though.
Right. If you did, would you just tell us and put it out there like that?
Would I? Well, if I did have any ideas, I would. But right now I don't got no. I got a couple things in the back of my head, but they're just kind of rolling around right now. So so I might have to come up with something new, I guess. So.
I got you. All right. At the end of every episode, we ask our guest for some advice for the next generation. I want to mention that to you so you start kind of stewing on it because it's become a thing and so much great advice. But I do want to ask you, another thing I notice about your career is that you've raced Fords, you've worked on Chryslers, you won the Engine Masters with a Hemi. You seem to cross manufacturer lines, and not everybody does that. And I find it to be interesting. So you've got great experience with all the OEs, or certainly the ones involved in drag racing. What are some of your opinions on the engines out there, having had experience seeing, you mentioned the 4-valve Coyote, you've worked on the modern Hemis, of course, you've done more than your fair share of small block Chevrolets. Speak on the engine architecture and the people that like to argue about which is the best. Who's right?
Well, I don't think anybody's right. I like them all. And if I have a customer come in with a Chevy, I typically will make fun of Chevys just because, or if they have a Ford, I'll make fun of Ford just because that's half the fun, I think, in the racing world. But I really don't have a preference. I made a mistake once in telling a customer who had a Pontiac motor that it didn't know it was a Pontiac because he was saying he had to run at 9,200 RPM. And the next pass, it kicked the rod out. So I don't think I'm going to say that too much anymore, but for the most part, engine doesn't know what brand it is. It's just got all the same parts in it. So, but I don't have a favorite. I like the old platforms, the new platforms. The Gen 3 Hemi, I think, is an awesome engine. We do a lot of them. It's a great street motor, and it's a great drag race motor, and the LS is awesome, and even the original small block's awesome. But I do have a few pet peeves in some of these race engines when they put head bolts and intake ports and stuff like that. I think that's ignorant. But for the most part, I have no preference on any of them.
It had to be a Pontiac guy that gave you trouble, right?
Well, we do a lot of Pontiac engines, believe it or not, and And it didn't know it was a Pontiac when the rod broke neither, but that was just my bad luck when I told him that. So.
Well, 9,200, knowing what I know about original Pontiac architecture, 9,200 seems a little high.
Well, it's pretty high, but it was aluminum rod, and it was a Bryant crank, and it had all good stuff. But them parts didn't know they was in a Pontiac, and it turned out that it was just really it needed a little bit more oil pressure to keep the rods lubed. So that was the engine builder's probably fault, not the fact that it was a Pontiac.
But you learned from that one, didn't you, Tony? Next time you build a 9,200 RPM Pontiac, you're going to jack that oil volume up.
I did learn the hard way. Unfortunately, when you jack the oil volume up, it knocked 5 or 10 horsepower off of it too. But that's still way better than having a hole in the side. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, better than a window in the block any day.
Yep, absolutely. So.
Tony, like I say, this one's going to be kind of horrible, and it just popped into my head. If you had to do it all over again, would you do anything different?
Absolutely not. I don't think so. I'm the kind of guy that learns everything the hard way, and I really don't think I would learn if I didn't do it that way. So I can't think of anything I would do different. It's been a great career, and I still enjoy getting up every day and doing this stuff. So I don't think I'd do anything different other than, what? I'm 58 years old, so when I went to school, there was no computers. I sure wish I took a little bit more interest in the computer world, so the fuel injection would be a lot easier for me. So, but that would be really the only thing different.
And that's a perfect segue to our, cornerstone of hidden horsepower, where we imagine that there is another generation that wants to follow in your footsteps, and they want to know how to get from where they are. Maybe that regular mechanic who's working on engines and not wanting to ever see it again, but would dream of being a high-performance engine builder. What advice, or making a living in the industry, period, what advice would you give to that person to help them advance their career, their lives, and build great engines?
Well, the first advice is it will never be easy to be successful at anything. So, you've got to be prepared to work hard. The new generation, they know that. The computer part of it's going to be much easier for them. I see that to be way easier for them. But where I see them struggle is maybe a little bit of the hands-on, the nuts and bolts of the thing. So, don't look at that a little bit harder to make them both come together and they're going to be more successful. So it's just really work hard. That's it. So
work hard, always great advice. Listen, it absolutely
don't get no easier than that.
And don't spend hour upon hour just watching TV unless it's YouTube and Total Seal Piston Running's page. Yep. Tony, great job. Really appreciate you coming on the show. Learned a lot, and that's what Hidden Horsepower is all about. I can tell that the phones are ringing off the hook over there at BES Racing Engines. That's got to be a good sound for you.
It is a good sound, except when you're so busy you can't get nothing done. But you gotta talk to customers too.
Keith, you wouldn't know anything about that, would you?
No, not at all. Yeah, I'm looking at the phone bank right now as we're doing this, and I'm seeing a lot of lines on hold. So we'll just say I definitely get it, Tony. It's a crazy busy time, and it's great. The industry's alive. It's cranking. It's busier than I've ever seen it, or at least any memory in the last 20 years of it. So it's great to see everything rebounding the way that it is. And I just got to say to Tony, it's funny. Depending on a part of the country, I get so many phone calls from different people all over, and who's your guy, who you working with. They got honing questions, they've got ring questions, just all kinds of questions. We field a mountain of questions every day, and it's funny is in that part of the country, and this is not taking anything away from any other shop out there, but the amount of people that say, well, where are you located? Well, I'm in, South Illinois, or I'm in Western Ohio, or I'm over here, over there. Who does your work? Well, Tony Bischoff. I mean, the reason his phone's ringing because I hear that all the time, and that's a real compliment, to these guys because they've got such a reputation for putting out quality work. It like I say, it almost precedes them, and that's a real tip of the hat and a compliment to you.
Well, thank you. That is a good compliment. And we are staying busy. And like you said, despite all the silly stuff going on, this is a booming world right now. Everybody loves to go fast and wants to hot rod their stuff. So, yeah.
Excellent. Tony, thank you very much for spending time with us today on Hidden Horsepower. Really appreciate it. You did a great job, and I'm just excited that you get to dive back into something you love. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you.
And there he goes, the Horsepower King, Tony Bischoff. Keith, that was a great one. Learned a lot, and across manufacturers, across motorsports, from the street to the strip and beyond. And he has, one thing he would look back on and do a little bit differently, and the answer is get involved in computers early on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things. I'm no computer guru or anything like that, but I'm not afraid of them. I know so many people. Joe, you had mentioned your age. I'm in the same age bracket, and so many people, especially the generations that are a little older than us, we'll say, stymied by computer technology, and it's again, when I first started messing around with just playing around with DOS back in the day, and jumped on it, and like we've talked about so many things, it's really kind of hard to screw up these days. Back in those days, you could put one wrong character in and you were dead. They're pretty bulletproof today, so jump in there, start plunking on the keys, play with things, learn. Bottom line, learn new things, and it's just going to benefit you in the end.
Well, it's funny you say that, because that's like a lesson for life. Like the day, as we get older, we wonder what it is that makes us old. At least for me. Like, am I old yet? Oh man, I don't know that song. Does that mean I'm old? That kind of thing. And I feel like I've defined it. You become old the second you stop trying to learn new technology. And the technology just like advances past you, and you're one of those people, no offense to them, it's just the way it is. That new technology, I don't know what it is. Guess what? Now you're old, just like that. But as long as you're trying to keep up the mobile devices, the phones, how often do people, they try to do something on their phone and they don't know what to do? It's because it's been made so easy, it doesn't seem like it should be that easy. Just touch it? Yeah, just touch that, and then you're good. You're connected, video, audio, you're talking to your friends around the world. There's a group of you. People don't think things could be that easy. And from what I understand with a lot of this self-teaching EFI or just inputting values, a lot of it has been handled by the geniuses so that you can work with it as a non-genius.
Completely agree. I remember, the very early EFI systems, and as stated, literally having to be a rocket scientist. I remember having access one time into a factory GM, fuel curve and timing tables, and just looking at it going, oh my gosh, I mean, we'll be here for years trying to, to input all this data and figure out all this data, into a factory ECU, and just how easy the aftermarket fuel injection systems have become. I mean, to say the word plug and play, it is pretty much. I mean, there's a little bit of data that's got to go in there, but they are amazingly sussed out these days. It's incredible how easy they've become.
And the making a mistake isn't as critical as it might have been back in the day also, because you can, undo or go back and change things in a way that will get things right. And all the tech and all the people, the Keith Joneses of the world that are out there to help you. And another great episode in the books, Keith, for the people out there who are thinking, man, I want that amazing ring seal that Tony was talking about. Who should they call? What should they do? And who's on the other end of the phone?
Yeah, just give us a reach out. TotalSeal.com is the website. There's a tremendous amount of information there, application, access to the podcast, links, YouTube videos that we've done, about, ring involved, building techniques, ring filing, all of that. You can always find resources at the website. But at the same time, if not, all of our contact information is on there. Myself, Kev, Bobby, Rye, Matt, we're all on there. We're here to help you. And as I've said so many times, we want to hear from you. Just like dealing with Tony, he'll call me. We'll bounce ideas around and get it down to what's right for your application, because there is no one thing that's right for everything. So once we know what it is you're doing, this is what we expect out of it, we can outline a whole package for you. And as I always say, make us your first call, not your last.
Excellent. He's Keith Jones, the Director of Technical Sales at Total Seal Piston Rings. I'm Joe Castello. Keith, great job. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thanks again, Joe. And looks like the circuit's going, racing's back. Hope to see you soon at the track.
I agree. Keith, thank you very much. And to all of you out there listening to Hidden Horsepower presented by Total Seal, there are more episodes. If you haven't already checked out the full archive, subscribe on Apple Podcast, Spotify, SoundCloud. Go to the TotalSeal.com website. All of the episodes are right there, plus the Facebook page and the Hidden Horsepower Facebook group. Just ask for an invitation and you will be in. And there is so much information being shared. It has been tremendous. And if you've got someone you'd like to hear on Hidden Horsepower, let us know, because we have got so many different shows that are coming your way. Why not one that is audience selected? Fire it off. All right, everybody, that's going to do it. Thank you very much to Keith Jones. Thank you very much to Tony Bischoff. My name's Joe Castello. You can follow me at WFO Joe or my podcast, WFO Radio. We talk drag racing on a regular basis. That's going to do it. We'll see you next time on Hidden Horsepower, presented by Total Seal.